Welcome back to the Talking Hedge. I'm Josh Kincaid, Capital Markets Analyst and host of your Cannabis Business Podcast. Today we've got Jason Lammers. He's the General Manager with 420 Wholesale Pack. Jason, thanks for being back on the podcast.
Thanks for having me, Josh.
So I wanted to chat a little bit about an article here from MJ Business Daily on cannabis-based packaging. That paper could reduce some waste and promote sustainability, as well as some other biodegradability things I want to talk to you about, some things that you're doing. But first things first, kind of give us a jumping off point. So article talks about how cannabis businesses have struggled for excessive packaging, for requirements. And so some people have reduced the layers of plastic and or paper. The whole idea behind that was to try to keep it child resistant. What are some of the things that you've done, I guess, to be more sustainable or more environmental?
Yeah, so in the article they're talking a lot about hemp and bioplastic type solutions. And while I think that's a really exciting future for us down the road, it's not very viable or largely scalable at this moment in time. Mm-hmm. So with the hemp product, most people are growing hemp for CBD flower, and so that actually produces less hemp fiber than desirably needed if you were really going to try to scale up for a whole bunch of hemp fiber for packaging purposes. So we really don't have the supply chain in place for the actual hemp material to really do it on a large scale fashion quite yet. And then we also run into issues with bioplastics or hemp plastics if it's a real rigid, thick wall container, because those, even if they're advertised as compostable, truly need an industrial compost environment to properly degrade. And for that to happen, it's got to get into somebody like Cedar Grove here locally in Seattle. And unfortunately, they're not able to accept cannabis packaging. So that really isn't a good solution for us here locally. And then nationally, there's just not a lot of good bioplastic or industrial composters available at scale as well. And so we were looking at hemp plastics and solutions like that in bioplastics a few years ago. We're very excited about it, but then ran into all these roadblocks. And so we started looking at recycled plastics as an alternative, because we know there's plenty of plastic out there, obviously, and there's a lot of it needs to be used and recycled as opposed to landfilled. And so we were able to secure a really high quality recycled polypropylene product. And we're actually in the process of rolling out a joint tube that's going to be manufactured from 100% recycled plastic.
Before you jump into that, Jason, because I want to tease some folks with that concept. Recently, you ended up through the Cannabis Alliance, a nonprofit. Maybe you can go into a little bit more about that, being on the committee for sustainability and reducing the thickness of the bags.
Yes.
Tell me a little bit more about that process.
Yeah, so at the Cannabis Alliance a few years ago, we formed a committee that originally formed around sustainable packaging solutions. We've since kind of expanded it now to address all kinds of sustainability issues. But effective January of 2020, this year, we were able to get the LCB to make some rule changes in our regulations with the specific intent of reducing our plastic use. And so we got the LCB to reduce our polybag thickness from 4 to 2. By that simple measure, obviously reduces your plastic mill thickness by half. And so you're therefore reducing your plastic waste by half with your poly bags when you're going from a 4 to 2 mil. You still have a nice barrier protection with a 2 mil bag. It still can be child resistant certified, and you honestly don't even need to change your processes. If you're a grower and you've got a bag design, you just simply place your next bag order with half the thickness, and you save a little bit of money and you help out with the environment. So that's a really cool solution. We also helped out with the beverage infuse makers, or the people doing infused beverages, and so they're typically putting those plastic NyQuil type caps on their packaging due to regulations. And that was also very wasteful. And quite honestly, most people you talk to that use those beverages didn't even use them in the first place. So we pointed all those things out to the LCB and got that changed as well, so that now they can do sensible dosing marks and common sense dosing rules, essentially just like a lot of industries use on your packaging itself, without having a requirement that adds to additional plastic waste. So those are two big wins we got for Washington State as far as reducing our plastic use, just through regulation change, which we're still working on, some other ideas in the future for that as well.
So timing is interesting. This article, kind of going back to that, talks about the economic shock caused by the pandemic, revealing some weaknesses in the global supply chain. And a lot of companies want to go green at the same time. But regardless, it seemed like at the beginning of this whole thing back in March, a lot of the supply was unavailable. And then some people wanted to go only in the US and not really get their packaging from, Wuhan, for example, or whatever, because of the fears. So tell me a little bit about the timing of it all. How did it work out for you or the industry specifically? And how do you think it's going to evolve, maybe to push things forward or delay them?
Yeah, sure. So supply chain's been a challenge for all industries in 2020. The initial COVID lockdown was a big shock, of course, just from manufacturing. But then that didn't last this whole period of time, but then they obviously had a huge backlog. Also, a lot of our manufacturing came out of China, and COVID happened right during the Chinese New Year. And so that just kind of exacerbated the problem. And so you had Chinese New Year delays on top of COVID delays. And so it really took them a long time to kind of pull out of that mess. And some would argue maybe they're still kind of dealing with that. But it wasn't, unfortunately, just China that had the supply chain issues. America's had those challenges. Really, the whole globe has had supply chain challenges in 2020. And so having a good reliable source for your packaging is really important. In cannabis, we're seeing sales growth month by month in the state. And so if you are on a path to see sales growth and you're in a very competitive marketplace and now you can't sell or fill an order because you can't get a child certified package that you need, that's a real big problem for our customers. And so one thing we did to try to address that is we had already pre-COVID been looking at solutions for sustainability on the joint tube. And so we kind of just were fortunate in the sense that this all happened. It just made what we were already working on that much more important because we were intending to get out of China with that product entirely, but not just to get out of China with it, but also come up with a more sustainable solution. So that's where we looked at the recycled plastics. We started out with the bioplastic options, didn't see the supply chain or the end use product, end use compostability in place for that. And so we pivoted to the recycled solution. The nice thing about that is, again, we'll be able to manufacture those in-house here locally in the state of Washington. So we'll have very good control of our supply chain. We'll be able to manufacture, I believe, about 1 million tubes every couple of weeks. So we should have no problems staying on top of orders. And we also have the recycled pellets in place as well. So we really made sure we had the supply chain for the recycled plastics in place so that we could continue to manufacture with our vendor partners on that. So we've got all that stuff lined up. We just got our mold finished, and hopefully here in the next month or so, we'll be in active manufacturing and production here locally and making joint tubes, price competitive to the Chinese product, made with recycled plastics and with a really reliable supply chain. So it's going to be really an exciting opportunity for people.
That's awesome. So it's going to be local, made in the U.S. and made from recycled resin or product, whatever. So back to this article, it's going to reduce the waste and increase some use and profits, stop waste pollution. One topic I wanted to kind of highlight for some folks who think that things are biodegradable or biocircular requirements in the future. There are products out there who claim to have biodegradable doob tubes, but you did a lot of research into this, and can you kind of explain how difficult it is to have a biodegradable plastic doob tube?
Yeah. That was our initial goal when we first started this process. We did quite a bit of research, both in manufacturing viability for us as a business, but then also what the end use looked like, and is it actually going to be recycled or composted effectively? And so through that process, we sat down with companies like Waste Management, Cedar Grove, different recycling and composting companies here locally, as well as other manufacturing partners that are in other green spaces and non-cannabis related sectors, really just doing the research to find out, what possible solutions were out there. And I'd read a lot about these bioplastics, was really excited about it. When I started digging deeper, though, I started finding out that once you start to build a rigid wall container with this material, molecularly or scientifically, it is going to break down in a thin film. But once you start building a real thick wall with that to create a packaging container like that, it's not going to really biodegrade as advertised from what we saw. And ultimately, it also would have to get into the industrial compost facility for it to even biodegrade if it did work as advertised. And that's not available as well. So it's kind of a moot point to really prove whether they were 100% wrong, because at the end of the day, even if they were right, there wasn't a waste stream for that to be collected properly and compost. And so industrial compostable bioplastics aren't anything other than waste products if they don't get to that proper waste stream. And so we do not have those waste streams in place really on a national scale at this point. And so There are very specialized solutions. Like in our state, Cedar Grove has been really instrumental in working with food companies on bioplastics, and those are more thinner film type, like trays and whatnot. And that's been a really effective solution for our state. And so some of those, certainly have some application today currently, but for the cannabis space, it's just not a practical application right now.
But it is a huge need for the industry. I mean, if you're making $1 million a month, that's probably maybe enough for Washington, but you're going to have to scale up to cover the rest of the country and the world. Joints or pre-rolls are one of the top selling products out there. I don't have numbers on me right now, but huge amount of product being sold, therefore a huge amount of waste, because like you said, they can't be recycled. Anything under 3 inches falls through the cracks, like you mentioned. And so what's the path to being able to scale up and cover all of the emerging markets? Is that something that you're going to franchise or just scale up and do? So are you seeking capital? How can people get involved?
Well, as far as the joint tubes go, we're going to be able to scale up rapidly on our own. So we believe that our annual capacity, if we're running our mold around the clock, is somewhere in the range of about 25 to 35 million tubes a year. So we've got a real large capacity available to start with, and once we get closer to that capacity limit, we can certainly invest in more molds so that we can essentially an additional mold would double our capacity essentially. So we have a plan in place to scale up currently, and then if we need to, we've got basically a plan in place to easily double our capacity if necessary. So we did do a little bit of math, both actually using some of the Talking Hedges data that you did on pre-rolls in the past, as well as some of Headsets data, and we're actually able to kind of come up with at least a future projection potential number. And we think that there's, easily, 400 plus million single pre-rolls that will probably be sold in a national scale once we have, all 50 states participating that are established. So there's definitely a large number there. And so obviously if I can only do 30, million roughly a year, that'd be a lot I'd have to have 10 plus molds to handle that. So yeah, there's a lot of opportunity. It's like you said, it's a very popular sector. I don't think pre-rolls are going away anytime soon. And that's why we really wanted to address that particular item in the packaging space, because it is so prevalent and it's sold in singles, grams. You can buy a full, concentrates, you can get a whole gram of, you can buy all the way up to an ounce of flour, but pre-rolls by at least 2/3 are packaged in singles. And so that's probably arguably one of the most wasteful products from a packaging standpoint. So hopefully this will really address that waste in a significant way.
Absolutely. Speaking about future opportunities, you ended up winning, and I don't know if we mentioned this, Jack Herer Cup down in Las Vegas, an award that's held concurrently with the MJ BizCon, the Marijuana Business Conference, world's largest cannabis conference. You've got a chalice behind you for, what is that, first place for sustainability product? Is that right?
It was actually best new cannabis packaging product. So it was actually a broader category than that. But yeah, Jack Herer does a great event every year, right during MJ BizCon week. MJ BizCon and Jack Herer Cup are technically scheduled right now for December. I don't know if that's going to happen. I probably wouldn't bet on that, but there may be some virtual type events this year for that. But
that's what I was going to ask. Okay, I was leading into that because you're on the board of directors for the Cannabis Alliance, and you helped to produce the Washington Cannabis Summit virtual conference over 2 days. And so wanted to know kind of how are you going to incorporate the rest of the year if we're not able to attend in person? How do you get more of those trophies? How do you get more people to know about this Doob Tube? What's sort of your strategy for the rest of the year?
Yes, we definitely have had to mix it up a little bit. Obviously, COVID's made everybody adjust their marketing plans a bit. And for us, one of the benefits we do have is we have been in this space for 5 years now. So we built a lot of really good relationships over that time selling cannabis packaging already. So we already have a pretty good established customer base and people that know us. And so we feel like we'll get a pretty good push just off of word of mouth and our established customers. But we are obviously going to do some marketing as well. You'll be able to see a nice half-page ad in MJ Venture magazine coming up. Probably will be like in the December issue, and that'll be going out on a monthly basis going forward. We'll certainly we got a commercial that aired at the Cannabis Alliance Summit that we did last week. That'll be airing on some probably social media platforms as well. We've got some banner ads for websites, so we'll be doing some of the virtual and web type advertising as well as some print ads. And then as far as trade shows goes, we do a lot of those when that starts to happen again. So we would anticipate probably a pretty busy travel season, hopefully maybe the second half of next year.
Offline, we were kind of talking about, the options for networking on virtual events. What's the effectiveness of virtual reality events, in your opinion, with either networking or direct sales? I'm going to be attending the Canna Cosmo event this year, trying to push this Cannabis Band-Aid. I don't know if you've attended virtual events. What's your take on them if we have to do this for the next year, either networking and or sales? What's been your experience?
Yeah, so I've done a few virtual things this year, like all of us, I think. And there's been a variety of, I think, ideas floated out there and things that have actually taken place. I saw one done that was kind of, you're like a little avatar. I've seen ones where you're just, incorporating Zoom platforms on a lot of them. But now there's also some new platforms coming out. And that's the one that we use at the Cannabis Alliance. Cool thing about that is it actually allowed you to break down into smaller groups in between the panels and in between all the discussions, so that you could actually get that networking time. One thing that I've really missed a lot from the cannabis space since COVID is that networking opportunity from trade shows and events. The cannabis industry does a lot of trade shows and events in normal times, and you get a lot of business done there, in my opinion. If you attend a lot of these things and show that you're committed to the industry, you make a lot of solid relationships with those things. And so that's been lacking. And that was one cool thing about what we had at the summit is we had these nice little tables. And so when you're looking at the floor format, it really looked like you're at a seminar with all these different tables, and you could hop around and you could see where everybody was at. So if you saw somebody you wanted to talk to, you could jump over. We had representatives from our legislature there last week, and you could run over and talk to your representative there at a table, just like you were there in person. Easier, really, because it'd be probably more intrusive, right? If you actually tap on a person's shoulder when you're actually at an event when they're at a busy table.
I was talking to Heather about the marijuana lounge bill, and then Representative Kloba pops in as we're talking about the bill that she wants to support. I was like, whoa, what is happening here? That was great timing. That was an awesome opportunity. Yeah.
So the idea of being able to break down into smaller groups and have these, really valuable conversations you would normally have, at these trade shows, was really cool. So I like that format a lot. I don't know if anybody's mastered the format yet. I think we're maybe still a few, maybe even a decade away before we're all, computer avatars where you can recognize each other and we can have a virtual world and talk. But it's cool to see the attempts, right? We're all forced into a tough position with all of this. And so certainly respect the effort that people are going to try to put on a good event. And they've all had their challenges, and they've all had some of their successes as well. So, I think we just got to do what we can with the time that we've got where we're in this semi-lockdown period.
Yeah, making do with what we have. There's a lot of people who don't even have access to internet. So trying to get work from home or, school, whatever, is not an option for a lot of people. So to ask them to wear a VR headset or something like that, to have additional hardware requirements is not really an option right now. So trying to work with what we got. Before we wrap this up, anything that I missed, anything you want to talk about?
No, I think that was great. I think we covered a lot of stuff. And if anybody wants to find out any more information, they can check us out at 420wholesalepack.com or feel free to email me at jason@snowcopackaging.com.
Perfect. All right, Jason, appreciate you being back on the podcast.
All right. Thanks for having me, Josh.
With that, we're going to roll this one up. I'm Josh Kincaid. This is The Talking Hedge. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, or don't, and I'm out. Don't forget to smash that like button on your way out and check out these other videos that we've got.